And let's continue this week of Locked On NHL in Utah. We're continuing to talk about goalies. We talked Connor Ingram yesterday, and now let's talk about the other guy, Karel Vejmelka.
You are Locked On NHL in Utah, your daily podcast on all things hockey in Utah, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the show, everybody. This is Locked On NHL in Utah, your number one daily podcast on the Utah Hockey Club. I'm your host, Robyn Leon, alongside Tom Callahan. And we once again want to thank everyone for making this show your first listen every day. We're free and available everywhere you get your shows. We're continuing our conversation, Tom, talking about goaltenders. We had part one yesterday. Hope you enjoyed the conversation talking about Connor Ingram. And now we're going to continue to the other part of this goalie tandem and talk about Karel Vejmelka, who has been around for a little bit longer. And I feel like a decent amount to talk about this kid.
Absolutely. And we talked about on yesterday's episode with Ingram, the 1A, 1B, where last year Connor kind of assumed that 1A role. Well, the 2 years previous, it was Vejmelka getting the 50-plus starts. So in 21-22, he had 52 games, then 50 the next season. Last year fell to 38. His numbers, actually a little better goals against. Save percentage has been hovering around 900. Last year, 897. I want to see that guy or any guy in the NHL with a 910. I think that is our absolute baseline anymore. It used to be 900. If you were at 900, everybody thought, oh, hey, that's pretty darn good.
Yeah.
It's not really anymore. 910, 915 is where you want to be. Exceptional goalies are going to be up or over 920. So to me, that's a bar that I want to see him hit. Again, speaking of hit, the cap hit itself, reasonable again for both goaltenders. Both goalies are $4.675 million total between the two of them. Now, here's the other difference. Ingram's 27, Vejmelka's 28. His cap hit this year is 2.725, if I could just get that out of my mouth. But this is the last year of his contract, and then he goes UFA. So this year, of the two guys with pressure on them, I think now it's Vejmelka's turn to try to really pick it up, earn himself a new deal, and either play his way back to 1A status with Utah or play well enough that somebody else is willing to take a chance on him. He is approaching the point in his career, Robyn, where this is going to go a long way towards determining, are you a starter or are you a backup? Are you a 1A or are you a 1B? Pressure season for Karel Vejmelka this year.
It absolutely is. And I feel like that kind of pressure should be a motivation for him to play that much better. You take a look at last year versus the previous year, you're right. The differences are pretty stark. And as well as just taking a look at maybe thinking of the idea of like maybe he got a little complacent, because maybe you take a look at, Ingram's numbers from the past, like we talked about yesterday, took a while for him to grow and find his own. And so to the beginning of the last season for Arizona, it felt like almost that Vejmelka got a little bit complacent. And I feel like that's what kind of like maybe fell him back a little bit. Ingram found that opportunity and took advantage. He made it look better. That was caused Vejmelka to took a back seat a little bit. And that's why he took that less than 50% workload going into this, finishing out that season, rounding out the 23-24 season. It's not what we expected, because we all were high on Vejmelka going into the season. It's like, oh yeah, he's going to have some high, maybe even have some really good trade value, because going into, he had some criticisms about Mullet Arena. I think that needs to be real. A lot of people had criticisms about Mullet Arena, but at least it was rumored that, or at least supposed, I can't translate the language of the podcast that he was on, but it was, someone that I trust said, oh yeah, no, he was essentially saying that it's a joke of an arena or whatever it might be. So it was like, oh, you know what? Let him play well. Let him focus on upping his trade value. But that didn't work because he didn't play as well as we thought he would.
So I am still glass half full on Vejmelka, and I'll give you a couple of reasons why. Number one,
Okay.
yeah, he is from Czechia, and I feel like international players that come over take longer to adapt. In most cases, and some guys take to it like a fish to water. They love the smaller rinks. For goaltenders, it is way different. I have played on both size ice surfaces, and I can tell you your angles are completely different on the international size ice. And the biggest reason why is because it's wider. An NHL rink is 200 by 85. An Olympic rink is 200 by 100. Now you have 7.5 extra feet on each wing. It can be a little disorienting. Plus, guys have a lot of extra space to move, and that's why the game's not as physical all the time in Europe. So there's a lot of adjustments to make. But even for goaltenders, your angles are off, your movement, you really have to. And a cross ice pass has a lot further to travel. Sometimes that's helpful. Sometimes that puts it to a crazy shooting angle that you might not be able to cover. So there is an adjustment period there. The other thing is European goaltenders in general, and again, I'm just kind of going off past performance here, which you should never do with investments. But with goalies, I think we have to a little bit. They've taken a little bit longer in the curve to really mature and come into their own. So I think that as far as am I ready to jettison Vejmelka here? No. I think that he has a really good chance to play himself up. He still gets the call in international competition. I think that only helps him. And you know what? Maybe there was a little bit of personal displeasure there last year. And then it might have been some professional displeasure that kind of grew out of that as well. So it's a new year, new situation. But again, the pressure is far more on him than it is on Ingram this year to really up his game and show us as a 28-year-old that he can go out there and earn himself another 3 to 5 year deal somehow.
And if not, if he's still unhappy, at least the deal, if it's not with Utah, with somebody else. I mean, ideally, he plays well enough. Utah's like, all right, we have our tandem, we have our 1A, 1B, but they're both so good that like it let them keep competing it out, and whoever just ends up being better in the season is just going to get the majority of the games, like by a very slim margin. That's the ideal situation, and I feel like I want to see Vejmelka continue to grow. I mean, I saw him his first season. I really enjoyed what I saw.
Yeah, and again, we talked about Ingram getting 48 starts. That's, like I say, that's the bulk. 50 appearances, so a couple of relief, spots in there, but not much. And that's kind of the other thing here that I think is interesting is neither one of these guys had a lot of relief work. This, to me, this year is a chance for Utah's goaltending tandem to establish itself a little better, because I think, and we talked about it last episode, teams that went 2 and 3 goalies deep this year, whether in the regular season or the playoffs. I mean, look at Vancouver. Vancouver was starting their third string netminder in a second round playoff series just because of the way injuries went. Now, everybody's going to second guess until next year starts whether or not a healthy Thatcher Demko makes a difference. But the point is, he wasn't healthy. And so if you're Utah and you're going to challenge into that 7 and 8 playoff spot, you need to have not only a one that you trust, if Ingram is the guy, the starter coming out, and you trust him, but you also need Vejmelka to be in and engaged and ready to go and able to shoulder a starter's workload if it comes down to it. So, it's not like I sit down with the guy and have deep conversations with him, but I'd really be interested to know where his head's at coming into this season. And again, I think mentally, if he's in a good place coming in and is going to embrace the change, the new city, the chance maybe is a chance to start over in the last year of his contract. And quite frankly, I don't know how you could really view the challenge any other way. This could be something that works out for him. But if not, if it goes poorly, I would not be surprised to see him go back to Europe.
Absolutely. Let's continue to talk about this. Let's talk about his role in this upcoming year, what we expect from him, and maybe what it holds for the future for Karel Vejmelka, as well as, I guess, go back to talking about the overarching view of this goalie tandem for the Utah Hockey Club. We'll do that right after this. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app usually go down the closer it gets to your event, with killer last-minute deals, all-in pricing, views from your seats, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets to all kinds of events in your area. So NBA tickets, MLB tickets, NHL tickets, concerts, comedy shows, you name it. You can use the app features listed and customize your spot and maybe find some inspiration of a spot that you've never hit before. Once again, you can see those views from your seats. You can get last minute deals, flash deals, zone deals, able to get the best deal for you with the lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, job loss protection, etc. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets. Lowest price guaranteed. Let's now get into some projections and some on Vejmelka's role this year, Tom, for NHL in Utah. I mentioned in the first segment maybe a slight displeasure for of what's going on at the arena situation, whatever like that. Let's say that's all now in the past. New team, new location, no need to worry about that. He's essentially getting another essentially. All these players we've been talking about getting fresh starts in a completely new place. Same franchise, same team, but new fresh start for all of them. And I feel like that's what we're going to see for Vejmelka.
I feel like, and again, we did talk about it before the break, attitude-wise, first of all, show up on day one, be ready to work, be ready to go and make this your season. And I think he will. The drive is still there to be a number one, to not be, the second fiddle, if you will, to Connor Ingram. And I don't think that that's, in his plans. He wants to get as many games as you can. Camp is huge. Camp is absolutely huge. Guys come into camp in shape now. And again, it's not like it was 30, 40 years ago where you come in, you do a couple push-ups, you skate for a while, and then you go play golf. Guys are working out way before they show up. And now there's anything wrong with playing golf. I love golf, but he has to come in and from the get-go, just dedicate himself to winning that starter's role. And I think that that's important for the competition. Here's the other reason why I think both guys can push each other to be better.
Yes.
And that I think they're both competitive enough that they can elevate each other through that kind of competition. And so I'm looking at both of these guys to come in and you know what, honestly, unless one just completely outshines the other in camp, if they're both about on par, I guarantee you they're both going to get their fair share of starts in the first 10 games. We're going to get a look at both of them. And then probably you'll see one guy kind of advance a little bit in front of the other into that A spot. And then, you're always reevaluating that, but that's probably by American Thanksgiving, maybe the early part of December, that you're really going to be reaching that call.
Yeah. And you're all, and I feel like when you have a tandem like this, you're right. The evaluation is almost always happening. And even if it gets past that, let's say they get to the All-Star break and the script is flipped. What we saw the first bit of the season is now something completely different. They'll change that. And it's happened before. We've had a situation. I think we've seen situations in which maybe a goalie might get a vote of confidence, and then, part of the way through the year, either a little complacent, or maybe they just might be having some kind of bug in their head or whatever. Something's going through.
Injuries happen too. Hot and cold streaks happen. You never know. You never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, and again, let's say player gets injured. 1A gets injured, 1B comes in, posts a shutout, 2 straight games in a row. I mean, you're not going to just bench the hot hand by the time the other guy gets back. You're going to keep. You're just like, all right, this guy's doing well. Let's keep going. And that's going to happen. And eventually that B guy becomes the A guy, and it keep flipping. It is a constant competition, and we're going to see a lot of that this year.
Well, and as long as they're battling, right?
Yeah.
To be better. I mean, you don't want them battling the other way where they're both trying to stink less than the other guy. Because that's
right.
not good.
No,
That's not good for your hockey team.
No.
But no, I agree. I want to see that kind of, competition. And I think that the other thing too is you look at the goaltenders around them, who, as I mentioned, and look, the West is chock full of excellent goalies.
Right.
So, and the reason we look at the whole West, we're not just looking at one division or the other, is because of that 7-8. You can have 5 teams make it from one division. So you look at the teams that are in contention right now. I think Vancouver had a surprise season because of how good Demko was. The Oilers probably still want a 1A. I don't know that they're sold on Stuart Skinner moving forward. Edmonton is in the Stanley Cup final, despite the fact that they don't feel they have a set goaltending tandem. But then you look at the other side of it, look at Markstrom, pick Calgary instead of Edmonton, and ended up going there, signing a big contract, looked like it was going to go well, and it has not gone well at all. So just because you have a big money starter doesn't mean anything either. But what you need is whoever your guy is to be able to carry you to some wins. That's the important thing. I think UC Saros in Nashville is a great example of a goaltender who really carried his team for different parts of last season and got them into the playoffs. And then Nashville kind of figured out its game at the end, got in, didn't really do any damage, but they got in, which honestly, a couple of weeks before the end of the season, I wasn't sure that they would. So then they got that hot streak going. They cooled off at the very end. But again, I mean, if you get a guy, whether it's Ingram, whether it's Vejmelka, who's able to carry you for a stretch of, 8 to 10 games where they play 9 of the 10 and can win 7, that's huge. And what that does is that makes you a playoff team. The old axiom, Robyn, is you win at home and you go 500 on the road, you're a playoff team. And I think in today's NHL, you have to be a little bit better than 500 on the road, which last year they weren't. They were a remarkably different home to road team just by the numbers. I would like to see them do better on the road. And I think these guys, the goaltenders, can help them get over that hump, but they may have to steal a few on the road.
Yeah, they will. And it will have to be a lot of essentially, working together, pushing each other, as you mentioned, right? It's not it's not more of it's a friendly competition. It's not, this is my net. I'm going to steal, I'm just going to command it all. It's not, that's what we don't want. You don't want to, you might want someone who's that eager, but again, you want them to work together.
And you never know what you're going to get out of the farm system either. I mean, again, Utah's restocking the cupboards right now, and they have been for the last couple of seasons, and they're going to do it again this year. It's very rare you get an NHL-ready guy ready to just jump out of there and come out of the draft and make an impact. But a year or two from now, there may be some pressure at any position.
Yep.
And I'll be real interested to see, this is one thing we haven't talked about as we're kind of wrapping up a goalie chat here, is do Utah feel the need to reach for a goaltender in any round? I suppose, and again, it goes back to if I'm the GM, my philosophy is taking the best player available according to my draft chart. So I think that that's important. Some teams will go more to the position of need. They'll draft, let's say, their highest rated defenseman because they feel they need a defenseman as opposed to the highest guy overall. But everybody's different. But I don't know that there's a lot of pressure to have to pick someone up to come in who's going to contribute right away. Unless, of course, like we say, injuries happen and other things could happen that, could be other issues. But as long as they're healthy and capable of playing, I don't see anything changing this year.
Yeah, I absolutely. And you know what? You made a good point bringing up, what the potential of the rest of the system looks like, because we're just talking the two guys who are up there, but there's still, I think, a whole number of guys who are down waiting for them to get their phone call, their cup of tea. Let's finish up the conversation, kind of maybe get an overarching look at goalies for this Utah franchise. We'll do that right after a quick word.
All right. Well, hey, Locked On Utah NHL fans, I want to take a moment to bring up one of our partners, the mobile game Ultimate Hockey GM. So if you've ever dreamed of becoming an NHL GM, and I think we all have at one point or another, and managing your own hockey franchise, maybe you think you could run Utah better than Bill Armstrong. Well, your dream can come true, and this game is most definitely for you. Manage every strategic aspect of your team, play through the seasons, and let it lead to glory. Maybe you're lifting the cup if you hire the right coaches and staff, trade players and draft picks, navigate free agency and the draft, all in a challenging and realistic world. As a Utah fan, you know there's no off season. We tell you this constantly. GMs are always making moves at every point of the year to improve their team's chances, and that's why I think you're going to love this game. So check it out. Ultimate Hockey GM is completely free and playable offline, which is fantastic. No internet needed. Play on the go as you want to and when you want to. By the way, Locked On Network listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code LOCKEDONNHL. That's LOCKEDON NHL in the game store. So make sure to check it out. Download the game. Visit hockeygm.app. That's hockeygm.app, or, of course, check it out in your mobile app store. Ultimate Hockey GM, start your dynasty today.
Let's finish up our thoughts on this episode, this two-part episode of Locked On NHL in Utah. We're talking goalies. Get an overarching view, and really quickly, Tom, I do want to mention this because you kind of talked about what's coming up in the pecking order right now, and Utah's in a unique situation as they have with the two guys up front and Vejmelka and Ingram, is those guys are competing to continue to make this team better, while down low, down in the minors and juniors, you got guys who are constantly trying to make them, make their call at some point. Villalta, I think he's like a lifetime AHL guy. He's there just to fill the road for the Roadrunners. He's really just helping them out while the younger guys are going, because I'm not saying you're not going to put in the trust in the other guys yet, but Anson Thornton and then Michael Rabel and looking at Melker Thielen, that, like, for example, those guys, they're all still in some way or another, to be honest, way too young.
Yeah,
he's
only 20. He's on his entry level deal. So and there's really no room for him right now if things stay status quo. So I agree. And then you've got a good chunk of goaltenders that are in the system one way or another. Kind of going down the list as you mentioned. But all those guys, I mean, 3 of them are 19 years old. The oldest one is Kornin, who's 21. So Rasmus Kornin, does that give him an edge? I don't know. I tell you what, Michael Rabel, 6'7", 215. Kornin is 6'5", 194. When did goalies get huge? I mean, I know it's been the last couple of years, but man, it's crazy to think of just how, I'm 5'11", and when I was playing, if you were 5'11", you're a pretty good sized goaltender. Now, people don't even look at you if you're 5'11", unless you're UC Saros. It's crazy, like how big these guys have gotten.
You would amaze me, and I want to mention this really quick. It kind of almost doesn't really make much of a difference, but I'm still using cap friendly as long as we can until we can no longer.
July 5th is your cutoff date.
July 5th is our cutoff, and we can use this. But Josef Kozhinash is still on technically the reserve list for Utah, and It surprised me because I didn't know he was still around.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of think about that and you'd be like, hey, where did he end up going? I mean, his contract, he's at a standpoint where last year he played over in Czechia, didn't play in the US. As a matter of fact, the last time he played in the United States was 21-22 when he got into a couple of games with the Coyotes, 22 with the Roadrunners that year, and then he actually was with Rapid City in the Coast. And then since 22-23, he's been back over in Czechia. So I don't think we're going to see Kozanash again. I think that I did see his name on the list. I thought that's kind of odd, but I think he's just there because there's no contract or anything. Yeah, that's it. If he ever decided or tried to come back over, it would have to go through Utah.
It is only for one more year though, because once Kozanash turns 27, then he's a free agent, unrestricted free agent, no matter what.
Right. But unless, and again, I mean, we talk about the European goaltenders take a little longer to mature. You never know. At age 30, maybe he's ready to make a comeback over stateside. And some guys, quite honestly, especially the European players, want to go home and play in Europe. That's what they're used to.
It is what they're used to. And again, because like you mentioned yesterday as well as today, very different style of games because of this because of the size of the ice, right? I can't say I know that from firsthand because I've never skated on international ice, never skated on that 100-foot wide ice. I've only done the the American game here. It was a little more narrow, but I can only imagine how it must be with the difference, and that's why they want to go. Not only do they want to go home because of that, but because heck, they get to be home.
Right, and I mean, some guys like the little fish in a little fish in a big pond. They like to be in the big pond. They like to be in the NHL, even if they're lost in the shuffle. Other players want to go home and be the big fish in the small pond. Maybe you play for your hometown team, and maybe you get paid better. If you were a bottom barrel guy here and you were making league minimum, you go back home, maybe you're making a little more than that. Maybe not in salary, but then there's other perks and things, there's housing and cars and all the stuff that can be done over there. Plus, it's the language you speak natively. It can be around friends and family. It's just different for everybody. And, different points of your career, you have different ambitions. And so if that's the case, I mean, I'd certainly wish him well. And that's why I'll be interested again to come back to Vejmelka, his season this year. What is he going to produce and how long is he going to push to stay? So those are kind of interesting things for me. But I like where Utah is. They have a lot of young goaltenders. And by that, I mean, we just talked about it. They've got 3 19-year-olds, a 20 and a 21-year-old that are in the pipeline. So you're hoping one of those guys develops. And if that is the case, then maybe a couple seasons down the road, or maybe even as soon as next year, if Vejmelka decides to go somewhere else, Ingram stays. You've got him under contract still, and then you might promote one of the younger goaltenders to maybe give him a shot and see what they could do in some sort of backup duty.
Yeah. I want to say this quickly before I kind of wrap up one final thought from you, but I feel like that Rabel is is the guy that they're trying to push to be like the future guy, several years down the road. But I feel like that's what they're going for. You mentioned his size, Tom. I want to say this really quick too. I saw him at prospect camp last summer in Scottsdale. Holy crap! Yeah, he is huge. If anyone's ever been to ice in Scottsdale, a lot of Utah fans, you probably haven't because you maybe haven't checked out the ice down in Arizona. Maybe you're an Arizona fan who's following Utah and you know what I'm talking about. The end of the ice, like when you're outside of the ice, it's kind of elevated at ice down in Scottsdale. You kind of before you get onto the ice, so one side's more elevated than the other. I was on the elevated side, and even myself being about 3 feet, like 2 feet off the from the ice surface, up. I still felt like Rabel was freaking towering over me, even with his size. I mean,
a couple extra inches in skates, and that's monstrous. That's your 6'9", 6'10" at that point.
Yeah, I was like, holy. I'm like, yeah, I feel like, and plus, again, just not only beside his size, I like what he saw in prospect camp, and again, that's at his young age.
I think
I said, that's why they're.
He and Thielen are kind of the guys I think they have the most hope in the future. I think they're the two most prized goaltending prospects. So those are probably the two names to keep an eye on. Keep in mind that the way the rules are, you can't play in the AHL till you're 20. So it's either back to junior or back to Europe. The only exception is if you're going to come in and play. And European players can be a little different. They can make exceptions. Like they could make exceptions for everybody if they really wanted to. But the way it sets up right now, if you're North American, you got to be 20, or you got to play in the NHL if you're going to play pro. Otherwise, you do have to go back and play junior or college. So that's kind of the landscape for this Utah Hockey Club in net. And you know what? Again, it's going to be interesting. You let those young goaltenders, if you bring them into the American Hockey League and you just give them guidance, give them instruction, but let them figure out how to play that North American game because both of those guys are European. I think that would be fantastic to watch them learn, and hopefully they have a good season with the Roadrunners, and things go really well for them as well. But I don't know. I like it. I like where Utah is because they're not overspent. They're not overextended. They're not trying to bury a Jack Campbell in the minors. You know what I mean? I think they've managed the position well from both a money standpoint and a value standpoint. So I like where they're at.
That said, my final thing I want to get from you, Tom, is I want you to rate your confidence level in Utah Hockey Club's goalies, like the two goalies we have now of a tandem, as well as the system that they have for the future.
So, again, keeping in mind that I think this team has improved year over year. I think heading into last year, my grade would have been around a C. By the end of the year, I think that moved up to a C+. So this year, I want to see them at a B- or a B. That is where I want to see this franchise improve to. And again, I think if you move to a B defensive / goaltending team, you then are in the conversation. So that is my expectation. That's where I want to see them. That is what I, as someone who is a fan of hockey and saying, look, if you're going to be an entertaining team to watch, but find a way to win games, it's time. It's not time to hang on anymore and try to be within a goal and pat ourselves in the back. No, it's time to win games. And to do that, they have to get to that B rating. That's the important thing.
All right. That's and anything else that we didn't touch on that if you feel like you should probably mention as a final thought.
Yeah, I'm available if they need a guy for practice. I can come in. I mean, I haven't skated in like 5 years, but I'm sure I'll be able to shake the rust off quickly. It'd be fine.
Yeah, it's just like riding a bike, right?
Yeah, it's like falling off a bike. It's still painful. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that definitely checks. Well, that's going to be a 2-part episode series of talking goalies on the Locked On NHL in Utah podcast. If you like what you heard, don't forget to leave a review, like, comment, subscribe if you have yet to already. We're available everywhere you get your shows, including YouTube, Sirius XM, ad-free on Amazon Music for all our Amazon Prime subscribers. Don't forget to interact with us on social media. We are on Facebook, facebook.com/LockedOnNHL in Utah, and on X at LO_NHL Utah. I am at Robyn_Leonio. Tom Callahan is at Callahan on Air. Interact with us and ask us a question you might have. We might answer right back or on a future episode of the Locked On NHL in Utah podcast. Thanks again, everyone, for listening to today's episode, and we'll see you guys next time.